Wednesday,
Next
Margaret?
Wednesday, we're going to be here. Well, next week, we're going to be here. A week from tomorrow, we're going to start coming 3 days a week, basically. Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday.
That would be correct.
That would be correct.
We're joined now at the library by Governor Maura Healey for a monthly Ask the Governor segment. If you want to call her, the lines are full already, but they will open up. You can always text her at the same number, 877-301-8970. Our colleague Hannah is sitting over there at the little table to the right. If you have a question you'd like to ask the governor face-to-face, run it by Hannah. Governor Healey, thank you so much for coming. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Jim and Marjorie.
Yeah, thank you very much, Governor, for being here. As always, I wanted to start. You played basketball all your life. You played basketball at Harvard. There was a story, two stories that are kind of linked. You issued a statement about this Next Benedict, this person who was a non-binary person who was in a fight in a girl's bathroom in Oklahoma and later died. You issued a statement about that. And then we have a kind of a local story, not involving a binary person, but a non-binary person, but a transgender player on a basketball team, this girls' basketball team between two schools, Collegiate Charter School of Lowell and KIPP Academy of Lynn, was stopped at halftime because of some interaction between the girls' players and a transgender player on the team. It seems like this non-binary transgender stuff, not just in Oklahoma, it's here.
I think those are two separate issues. With respect to what happened in a basketball game, I haven't seen the clip. I really haven't read the whole story there, so I don't know. But what I do know is that what happened in Oklahoma is that the Oklahoma governor supported and signed into law a law that prevents people from using the bathroom of their choice. And, you know, we have a different public accommodation law here, and our LGBT kids are protected in schools and elsewhere. And, you know, it sickens me. It makes me so sad, you know, and to listen to the grandmother of Next Benedict speak about them. And they were a straight A student. They were doing everything right. And can you imagine? You're 16 years old and you're savagely beaten to the point of death. I mean, it's just so wrong. And my heart goes out to trans kids across this country, to their families. Know that in Massachusetts, you are seen, you are loved, you are respected, and you are protected under the law. And I can say that unequivocally.
We're talking to Maura Healey, the governor of the Commonwealth. Speaking of life and death, can we spend a couple of minutes on that which we spent a couple of minutes with the Attorney General in the first hour, the mess at Steward Healthcare. You've said quite unequivocally you didn't use the word hell. I was going to say get the hell out of the state. Let's assume they do. What happens?
Well, them getting out of state is just a short way of saying we need them to stop operating and running these hospitals and have that taken over by new entities. And that's what we are working on, and our Secretary of Health and Human Services is working on and has been for several weeks. I mean, the story of Steward, it's really a story of greed. You know, and what happened here is that Steward came to town many years ago. It was one of the first entrants of a for-profit entity into our healthcare space, which is new because most of our hospitals in Massachusetts are not-for-profits. And they took over the Caritas system, which is a system that provides a lot of care, particularly in vulnerable communities, lower-income communities. And then it appears that the CEO and management essentially proceeded to strip the Steward entity of real assets and leveraged it up with boatloads of debt. Boy, and here we are in this situation. I'm focused on protecting patients, protecting 16,000 jobs at issue here, and protecting the stability of the healthcare system. And we continue to work on that every day in what we hope to be an orderly transition. But you know, it's a situation that the selfishness and greed of Steward and its management and its CEO created, and you know, my job is to focus and keep our eyes on the ball in terms of, you know, taking care of business right now and cleaning up the mess that they created.
If we can stay on this for a few minutes. I know when you were Attorney General, you were fighting with them to get them to do required financial disclosure, which they didn't do. They were fined some. Recently, they say they disgorged tons of stuff and they're in compliance. You say they're not in compliance. A couple of questions about that without getting lost in the weeds is, what are you not getting that you think is critical? And of that which you are getting, do we know how much the CEO, De La Torre, he of 2 yachts and 2 private jets, they're company jets, I don't know how to pronounce it, Cerebus or whatever the private
Cerebus.
equity firm is. Do we know how much they've pulled out of this company and the financial information they have disclosed?
Not entirely, but it's not rocket science, and you don't need an accountant to do the math here. I mean, the guy's got 2 yachts valued at an estimated $100 million, a couple of planes. I mean, a ranch in Costa Rica, mind you. I'm supposing here that money came directly from what he took out of the Steward Healthcare system. So it sickens me. It bothers me. But there will be accountability, and others can speak to that. My job, though, as governor, is to make sure that we are shoring up what we need to do here to protect patients, to protect providers, and to protect the stability of the healthcare system. In terms of information, I mean, this is part of the problem, right? And what we have talked about for a long time. They fought, our hospitals, you're required by law to provide financial information, which is important because we're trying to keep an eye on the stability and the financial health of these companies, which, these are companies, these are organizations that provide a critically important service, healthcare, right? So we need to have that information. It was Steward who actually went to court years ago to fight turning that information over. As Attorney General, I took them on. We won. They then proceeded to appeal. So it's on appeal. The information they provided, it's whatever. It's some information, of course, but we don't have audited financial statements, which I think speaks to exactly what's wrong here. If you don't have audited financial statements, that's because somebody's refusing to certify that they've been audited, or you haven't been doing the proper bookkeeping to begin with. Either way, it's a problem. But we're continuing to have conversations with all interested parties to work on an orderly transition of these systems.
Would you be upset if another for-profit took over these hospitals?
No. What we want to do, though, is make sure that the entity taking over these hospitals is going to do right by patients and do right by workers.
Joan Bernanke's got the Globe columnist got a great question in her piece about this, saying, can the state stop De La Torre with the guy with the 2 yachts, 190-foot and a 90-foot fishing boat? Can the state stop him from selling to another for-profit entity and making even more money? And which of the hospitals will have to close?
Yeah. Well, this is all what's happening right now, and I think it's caught up with him as CEO, and it's somewhat out of his control right now, as it should be, because now adults have come into the room and people who are responsible, and we're all working together to try to sort that out. I've said from the beginning that not one dime should go to Steward or its CEO or its management. We've got to focus resources and attention on shoring up the stability of those facilities and making sure that our communities are served.
I have one last question. You were asked the other day if you thought there might have been some crimes, and you said there's a chance there might be. We asked the Attorney General this too. I'm asking this not as a former lawyer, but as a layperson. When the objective facts that we know, thanks to Brian McGrory and other reporting, is that the company decided it was an appropriate expenditure to buy 2 jets to go to mostly vacation sort of
French Riviera,
locations and
St.
that sort of
Kitts.
thing. At the same time, we all read the incredibly painful story in the Globe, just one instance that we know of, where a woman died because when they went to get the equipment that would have saved her life in all likelihood, it had been repossessed. Isn't that on its face criminal behavior by the people in charge, Governor?
It certainly raises a lot of questions, and it raises any number of questions about the lawfulness of actions. And there will be others, state and federal law enforcement, who have the expertise and the capacity to address that. That's not my job as governor. But certainly just knowing that, and also knowing what happened here, where, again, Steward came in. They had these entities, right? They took over these entities that were operating in communities around the state. They then proceeded to sell the buildings and the land to these private equity concerns and lenders. And then those guys actually leased back the building and the land to Steward, and Steward paid rent. It's a real question about whether that was the right rent or whether that was overvalued. And with that money, we know then money went out to Ralph De La Torre, okay? So you don't have to be a lawyer to have real questions about what happened. That'll be for others to sort out. I've got to keep my eye focused, Jim, on how do we protect patients, how do we protect 16,000 jobs, and how do we protect communities and the stability of a healthcare system that is already experiencing strain. One of the things that we're really focused on is workforce. How do we get the workforce into our hospitals so that we can deal with some of the capacity challenges? You know, what do we need to do here? You know, it's one of the reasons I've leaned so hard into workforce this year through the budget and other investments. But you know, that's what we're focused on right now.
You know, Jim mentioned the young mother that died, had to be transferred at midnight to Boston Medical Center when she was in extremis.
Well, this is a hospital system that, again, not only has put patients and workers at risk, it you know, has also, seems to have had a pattern of stiffing suppliers and vendors. So, you know, that matter is under investigation. We'll see what comes of it. But, you know, suffice it to say, there are any numbers of suppliers and vendors who haven't had their bills paid by Steward. There's a lot of litigation on right now about that. I can tell you that our State Department of Public Health is on site at these facilities. We expect Steward's full cooperation in safe staffing levels, and also complying with our monitoring there. But we're going to continue to stay right on this.
Well, you know, we had a gentleman text or call, I forget which one, saying he had a colonoscopy scheduled at Steward, you know, someday last week, and he was wondering if he should go. You mentioned the DPH is on staff there, but what would you tell him? Would you tell him to try to go to Brigham or someplace else?
No, I encourage people to continue to go to our hospitals, including our Steward hospitals. And, you know, there are a lot of people working in these places, the staff who are working incredibly hard, hospital administration, management. This is not their problem, okay? They didn't create this. They're dealing with this because they had a selfish, greedy CEO and management team in Dallas, Texas, starving them of the resources and the supplies that they need. So we're there as a partner, you know, on the ground, on site. We do not want people to delay care that they need. So we want them to continue to seek that care. But you know, this is one of these situations where, you know, a private for-profit entity came in and did things in a way that was just so wrong, and, you know, puts communities and people's lives at risk. There will be accountability and there will be a reckoning, no doubt. But in the meantime, my job is to work with others to make sure there's an orderly transition here of this hospital system to other entities.
Jerome in Roxbury, you're on with the Governor of the Commonwealth, Maura Healey. Welcome, Jerome.
Oh, hello, Governor. Hi, Jerome Hazen. In all honesty,
Jerome.
I got to say that I am with that. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I sure can.
Okay, hi. In all fairness, I just want to say that I am with XR Boston Extinction Rebellion, and I'm going to keep it just a practical question for you. And I hope you're enjoying the postcards that we have everybody sending in, that you're reading them to take in the full effect of what we're trying to do. But in a car-centered city like Boston, why don't we see more development of electric charging stations that are going to enable the transition into renewable energies as a source of transportation fuel?
Jerome, thanks for the call.
Thanks, Jerome. I can't speak to the city of Boston, as you know, Jerome, but I can tell you as your governor, we are focused statewide on what we're doing around building up electric vehicle charging capacity. I was just in D.C. this past week, meeting with other governors, meeting with the Biden administration, meeting with the Deputy Secretary at the Department of Energy, where we talked about electric vehicle infrastructure. It's something that our Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs is very focused on. We've mapped this, and she's working with our Secretary of Transportation on how we can come up with the funding that we need to deploy appropriate electric vehicle infrastructure. We're proud of the fact that here in Massachusetts, and you know, it's interesting because I'm talking to other colleagues from other states, it's clear to me we're a state that really is leading in terms of the demand for electric vehicles. Now, to satisfy that demand, we need to have those charging stations. And we also need to do things like modernize our grid, build out the substation capacity in order to provide the electricity needed to use those electric vehicles and so much more. So we're really, really focused on this. We continue to chase federal funds for this. I'm proud of the fact that when I took office, I said we were going to compete for every single federal dollar. To date, we've submitted applications that have brought back to the state $3 billion, including some really important funds for climate infrastructure. We are leading among states when it comes to planning and thinking about coastal resilience, resilience generally. And by the way, this week, hopefully you'll see an economic development bond bill filed by my office where we are making a play for Massachusetts to be the global hub of climate tech innovation. We've got the answers right here in Massachusetts to solve our climate needs, and I'm excited about leaning into that as a great economic opportunity.
In a minute, can you give us 30 seconds, if you can, on what this economic development bill is going to look like? But you mentioned energy. We had Azad Ashai, who's the CEO of Nexamp here the other day, with Joe Curtatone, former mayor of, obviously, of Somerville. He said something, we intended to play it, but it's too long. He says, we said, what would you ask the governor? And we said, you were coming on Tuesday. He said, so for me, it's setting a goal, talking about the importance of solar, then actually working with stakeholders, not just the utility companies, because here in Massachusetts, we have a bad habit when we think of energy policy, go to the CEO of Eversource and National Grid. What do you say to Ashai?
Oh, well, I appreciate that. I saw him, was with him just a couple weeks ago. So, his space is solar, and we as a state did something that hadn't been done before. We actually mapped the entire state to see where else we could add solar capacity on the tops of buildings, on roadways, everywhere, right? So now we have a plan. We are also competing actively for grants from the Biden administration under a program, Solar for All. We want to get as much as we can in terms of federal dollars to match state dollars. Remember, I'm the first governor to appoint a climate chief. I'm the first to make good on a promise to deliver 1% of our budget to climate, and so we are working on these things. And I think that the point about that Zad is making is an important one. We need to have support at all levels for something like solar to take hold. That means permitting, right? It means the engagement of local communities. Everybody's got to get on board and see the imperative and the opportunity that we have to move more quickly away from fossil fuels to a renewable future. We've got to do that. We've also got to support work around infrastructure. Right now, I'm proud of the fact that there are 30,000 homes in Massachusetts as we speak being powered by Vineyard Wind. That happened, guys. A lot of people doubted it. That happened, and it's just going to grow. It's great. But as we build out offshore wind, what's really important? That we actually have places to deliver that energy on land, right, so that it can get out to our homes and our businesses. And that's why I also need community support for the siting of substations, grid work, other things that will allow the actual delivery of that energy into the grid. So, I just encourage folks to get involved at the community level, because if we see opposition there, then we don't get to where we need to be. It's also why, I want folks to know that we are working regionally. And one of the leadership meetings that I was part of last week was a meeting of all the New England governors to talk about how we can work together on procurements for energy, on the siting of transmission for energy, on reliability for the grid, because while we're all different states, these things don't know state boundaries, right? I mean, we've got hydro coming in, we've got wind coming in. It's going to cross a number of states. So we need to think as a region, and we'll be stronger for it. And I'm looking forward to all that's to come with that. I would like to mention the other couple things on economic development. When is this
Yeah,
a
go ahead.
Sure, go right now.
Okay,
Sure.
so it's only a slightly awkward segue. So economic development, basically, folks, here's the deal. We have a great bond rating here in Massachusetts. Not only do we have a record amount in our rainy day fund, our stabilization fund, our financial footing is strong. Just months ago in April, we received an upgrade from the rating agencies. What that means is that we have an ability to go out and issue bonds and borrow. The thing I'm proposing is an economic development bill that will allow us to go out and issue bonds and borrow to make investments in economic development initiatives for our state. 3 areas. Life sciences. Massachusetts needs to lengthen its lead as the global epicenter for life sciences. The cures, the innovations, the treatments, all of it is here. We need to build on that. 18 of the 20 largest life science companies in the world are in Massachusetts. We want to keep them here. We want them growing here. We want to support young entrepreneurs in this space as well. And by the way, we're going to go chase those other 2 who aren't yet here. Second area, climate tech. I mentioned we've got the opportunity to make Massachusetts the global hub for climate innovation, to power our way through the climate crisis, to develop and pioneer the solutions that not only will address the challenges in this country, but the challenges we face around the world. And the third area is applied AI, okay? AI's here, folks. It's up to us to make sure that it's used responsibly, effectively, and in furtherance of public good. So what we're doing is we're leaning into this as a space. I believe that Massachusetts can be the leader when it comes to applied AI, how we actually use it in healthcare, how we actually use it as we're studying right now to make sure that people with disabilities riding the T have better access to services, how we can better help healthcare workers in hospitals diagnose and treat patients, for example. So many applications, and we've got so many leaders in AI right here in Massachusetts. We're bringing them together, and this will be the third part of that. Finally, for those out there, and we're here at Boston Public Library, we're surrounded by a vibrant creative community and arts community. We're leaning in to our creative economy in our economic development bill. It's an important part of who we are. Also, tourism. I don't need to remind anybody here in Copley Square, but next year, 250th anniversary of Massachusetts and where it all began. And so we're looking forward to that as part of our economic development initiatives as well.
That wasn't that awkward, by the way. But and also, I know what the answer to this is, so I don't know why I'm wasting my time. You have so much big stuff pending before the legislature, from the housing bond bill to this economic development thing, and there are a ton of other things. I'm not going to do my usual and say it's only a few months till the legislature goes on a 5-month vacation. How nervous, I'm serious, how nervous are you on, it's almost March, that a lot of these things just aren't going to get addressed because they go home early?
We're going to get it done. We're going to get it done. I mean, this is the legislature that, effectively, meets year round almost. So, we're going to continue to work on all of this. I just look back at this past year. April, people will be turning to taxes here soon. And because of what we got done, first time in over 20 years, we cut taxes, $1 billion tax cut. And the vast majority of that is going to go help a lot of lower income and middle income folks. In April, families in Massachusetts are going to see the most generous child independent tax credit in the entire country. I'm happy about that. I'm happy about the work that we were able to do to make Massachusetts through that tax cut more equitable and more competitive. I'm happy we were able to get past free breakfast and lunch for every school kid in Massachusetts. That's a big deal. Also saves parents money and headache and deals with stigma. I'm proud of the fact that we have Mass Reconnect. Okay, that was the program that we dreamed up that basically it makes community college free to anybody 25 years and older. We all know people who weren't able to start college or finish a degree for one reason or another. And now they're going to be able to do that. And just since we launched that program alone, we've seen a 44% increase in community college enrollment. And that means people who are going and getting certification and programming and degrees for jobs that are available today. We all have goals, and a lot of the folks in the audience have goals around, what we want to do with climate, what we want to do with continuing to pioneer research and development. And, the way we get there is by working together and supplying a workforce, and that's something that Mass Reconnect is all about. I could go down through the list. Look at the way we stabilized childcare this last year. We stabilized the childcare system. It's still too expensive. We're working on driving down the costs. But we got a nice shout out from U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo the other day because she said, Massachusetts recognizes that a foundational piece of economic development and growth and stability is childcare. And she commended us for really leaning into the investments that we've made in childcare this year. So, You know, I look with optimism to what's ahead. Do we have a lot of work on our plate? Absolutely. Housing's probably at the top of the list. We've got a great economic development bill that we're about to file as well. But I know we can do it working together. We can get a lot done.
Revenue shortfalls don't make you nervous either.
Nobody likes a revenue shortfall, right? We all want more money in our
But
pocket.
you have big plans.
But no, I think let's distinguish a couple things, right? The budget, that's talking about money that we have. That's revenue. So I'm always, we're watching to see what's happening with revenue. We have the benefit of some new revenue this year with the surtax, which we have made good use of in terms of investments in education and transportation following the will of the voters. But when I talk about the housing bill, that's a bond bill. The economic development bill, that's a bond bill. That's about giving us the authority to go out and raise money through the issuance of bonds that can be, deployed and invested in what we think is going to make a big difference. And that's the plan for housing. We're down a couple 100,000 housing units in this state because for years, for decades, people have not done what needs doing when it comes to housing. We suffer. It's funny, I spoke at the chamber this morning, and I talked about our economic development bill, I talked about life sciences and, climate tech and these other things. After I was approached by a group of women who run an executive search firm for life science companies, and they said, Governor, thank you so much for talking about housing. It is the number one reason we can't land people here. We've got so many people who want to come to Massachusetts because we've got this incredible ecosystem of innovation and research and hospitals and companies in life sciences. But she said, I can't find an affordable place for them and their family to live. And so they go elsewhere. She's like, thank you, because you want life sciences to soar, we've got to fix housing.
Well, we want to get to Milton and what happened over there regarding housing, but before we do, I know you were very passionate about Steward Healthcare. A nurse from St. Elizabeth texted a while ago saying that, the Department of Public Health is on site, but they're accompanied constantly by management, and this nurse claims at least that they are unable to talk to people at the Department of Public Health about problems there. I hope she's exaggerating, including rats running around the medical floors. I certainly hope that's not true, but anyway, that is her claim. So Milton has just basically said that they're going to ignore the law that requires them to create new zoning so they can have multifamily housing in Milton. What can be done about that? We talked to the AG about this as well. I mean, she's suing them today.
Yeah, she filed a lawsuit, and I strongly support the lawsuit. The law is clear, and it needs to be enforced. As I was just saying, housing is the number one issue, the number one challenge facing our state. And the only way we deal with that is to create more housing. I put forward a plan in that bond bill I'm talking about where we can identify state-owned land, unused, uninhabited mills and buildings around the state and give people the money to go out, right, and rehab it and turn it into housing. There's money there to rehab 40,000 units of public housing that are currently going unused because they're in lousy condition. There's money there for the development of affordable housing for lower income folks, as well as market rate housing. Think about the number, and I focus on this, the number of 20 to 40 year olds, right, who may leave the state because they can't afford to find not just a house to buy, but a rent that works for them. And God forbid if you have kids, right? So, we need to get this done. And the MBTA Communities Act, a law the legislature passed that Governor Baker signed, is a good and important start. And that required communities to zone and rezone in certain areas to build more housing capacity out. Let me remind you that nearly all communities have complied, all right? They've done that work. That's good. Now, Milton has more work to do, and I have said that my team and my Secretary of Housing will continue to stay at the table with Milton. We gave Milton $60,000, the state did, to help them work through what we thought was a good plan. The referendum vote was disappointing to me. And I also was clear that there would be consequences for that, specifically the withholding of state funding for various grants.
Like what? What does that mean?
I mean, there's 140,000 they're supposed to be
The
getting for the
seawall.
construction of a seawall.
Yeah.
they're not going to get. I
Yeah.
mean, there are any number of things. And this didn't come out of the blue. We'd been warning communities for the better part of a year explicitly about what was at risk should they not do what needs doing. So we'll stay at the table. I hope we can, work with Milton and see a new plan. But the message should be clear to every community out there that we meant what we said in terms of compliance and enforcement. And we really need, the bottom line is this. Think about this. I'm looking out at the audience, and for those listening, no one city or town on its own can solve the housing crisis. Everybody's got to work together. Everybody's got to do their part. The reality is, if we don't work together and really do everything we can to lean into housing production, which is what my bill does, in addition to some policy changes like allowing folks with property and attached garages on their property to turn those into housing units. We call them accessory dwelling units. They call them so-called granny flats in other places. Whatever you want to call them, they have been a surefire way to increase housing availability in a state. California's doing it. A bunch of states are. We should be doing that stuff in Massachusetts. So, this is the time for collective action, for the collective good, because the trajectory of this state, where we go in terms of economic development and growth, whether people decide to come to school here, study here, stay here, grow a business here, grow a family here, for those of us, who were born and grew up here, our ability to stay here, grandparents to be near grandkids, all this depends on us taking action. We got to start by passing that housing act that I talked about. We got to start community by community. Those of you who aren't involved, get involved. Run for planning board, run for your zoning commission, right? Get involved and help make the case to your neighbors about how important this is.
We're talking to Governor Maura Healey. Linda on Cape Cod is on the phone. Thanks for calling, Linda.
Hello, Linda.
Yes, hi. Thank you so much, Jim and Marjorie. I've been a fan for 25 years.
Thanks.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for what you do.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Governor, I appreciate your commitment, both as governor and AG, to come on this show and take questions and talk about issues. My issue has to do with drug prices. I pay more for medication just because I am a resident of Massachusetts. I have multiple myeloma. It is a blood cancer that is not curable, but it is treatable. A medication called Revlimid is standard of care for multiple myeloma patients, and ideally we're on it for years because it means that the cancer is at bay. It's been around for decades. It is very effective, but unfortunately it's incredibly expensive. A monthly supply is over $25,000. I have swallowed about $1 million of this medication already since my diagnosis in 2021, and I am only 56. Bristol-Myers Squibb is the manufacturer.
Hey, Linda,
They offer
Linda, I'm sorry. You have to ask a question, please, of the governor.
I'm
Thanks.
right there.
Thanks.
Bristol-Myers Squibb offers patients a copay assistance for this program. It's available to anyone with private insurance. It reduces the copay to $10. I was able to participate this, but now as a Massachusetts resident, I'm no longer eligible. What changed is a generic hit the market, and even though that generic is also $1,000 a pill, and prices have continued to go up.
Hey, Linda, I hate to be
we're out of time
impolite.
here.
If you either can ask a question or we can put you on hold and connect you with the governor's office, since your case is not a simple one. Would you like to speak to
No,
Linda?
I think that's great. Linda, I appreciate the concern that you voice. It's one that a lot of folks struggle with in terms of the cost of drugs and needed medication. Why don't we just
Okay,
take
let's do
your
it.
information so we can learn more about
Linda-
the specific generic and where it is on our formulary?
Linda, please stay on hold. We'll get all your contact information and you'll hear from the governor's office. Thank you for making your call, and we wish you a lot of good health luck in the future.
We're talking with Governor Maura Healey. We'll be right back after a quick break. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at facebook.com/GBH News and youtube.com/GBH News.
We live in one of the most affluent cities in the nation, but also one where the wealth of Black households is dramatically lower than their white neighbors. Systematic racial inequality has a long history in Boston. From GBH News, I'm Soraya Wintersmith, host of What Is Owed, a new podcast exploring what it looks like for one of America's oldest cities to figure out its reparations debt. Do you have thoughts to share about this issue? Call or text your comments to 617-958-6061.
Support for our programs comes from you. And Explo, part magic, part summer enrichment program for kids and teens entering grades 4 through 12. Locations include Boston, New York, Oxford, and more. Information at explo.org/summer. And Finn Partners, a marketing and communications agency dedicated to creating deeper relationships between brands and people in Boston and 34 other locations worldwide. More information at finnpartners.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marge Regan. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News, facebook.com/GBH News. We're joined now until a little bit after the 1 o'clock hour by the Governor of the Commonwealth for obviously Ask the Governor. The lines are full, but you can text her at 877-301-8970.
You know, Governor, before we get back to the call, a lot's been written about your former partner, appeals court judge Gabrielle Wolohojian. Everyone says she's the most qualified person and she's got a great record, et cetera. But since she was your former partner, it's almost like if you appointed your ex-husband or ex-wife. I mean, looks like it's kind of an inside deal, undermine the public trust in terms of being nepotism involved. I mean, what do you think about that?
Look, I've said before that she is incredibly qualified. She was recommended under the prior administration for this position. She was once again recommended. I just happen to be the governor. So, you know, I can't apologize for having had a personal relationship with somebody who is supremely talented. We worked in the same field. We were both lawyers, and you know, I went on to become AG. She went on to become a judge on the appeals court. So, you know, I also want the public to know there's a process for handling any questions about that. It's something that I know Judge Wolohojian takes seriously. She addressed it the other day, which is to say that any matter that comes before her, she'll evaluate under the operating recusal provisions that all judges abide by. And her answer that she would evaluate on a case-by-case basis is exactly the answer that former SJC Justice Margie Marshall gave and said is the appropriate answer, and also the answer that Judge Nancy Gertner said is the appropriate answer, as evidenced in her letter today to the Boston Globe.
But
You know,
still,
can I-
the optics here are unusual. Let's put it that way. Like I
Hey,
said,
they are unusual. I mean, it's, yeah, but as I say, I can't, you know, you got me as Attorney General, you got me now as Governor. We had a relationship in the past, and, you know, I can't apologize for the career trajectory that we both happen to have been on. But I can assure you I have utmost confidence in the job that she'll do on an incredibly important court. I'm proud of that nomination. I'm proud of the nomination of former State Solicitor Bessie Dewar to the SJC a few weeks ago. And at this point, it's before the Governor's Council to decide and to vote on.
but the
I have a
Governor's
que-
Council didn't really ask about which cases. She said a case-by-case basis. I mean, maybe it would be a good idea to say she would recuse herself from anything having to do with...
And I think they did ask her about recusal. She gave the appropriate answer, and as Justice Marshall said, and as Judge Gertner said, the answer is case by case. You are not to answer about hypotheticals as a judge when it comes to evaluating recusal. So the answer is the appropriate answer. She also underscored that by saying that she would in no way want to or ever sit on cases where there was an issue or a question. So, you know, it is what it is. And as I say, it's with the Governor's Council, and I know that, and I stand by my nomination.
I have one quick question about recusal because I'm totally confused. I think I read in the Globe that you said you didn't see a need for recusal. I then read in an editorial in the Globe that when you were the Attorney General, and even after you ended being the Attorney General, Judge Wallahojian recused herself from every case involving the Attorney General's office, not a case-by-case basis. So assuming those facts are right, forget what you said. Let's just talk about what she did while you were Attorney General, and even after your relationship ended is what I was trying to say, not when you ended as Attorney General. Why would she apply a uniform rule with Maura Healey as Attorney General and a case-by-case rule with Maura Healey as Governor?
Well, first of all, that's not what she said. And what was said is that it's one thing to go back and look at the record and be able to say, I recuse myself from, and this is the way I handled it. Also, I was Attorney General. I was the state's lead lawyer, the one practicing before those courts. It's a different position now as governor when I'm not, and my team is not practicing before the court. So it poses a different question. What is important here, though, is that the answer on recusal has been said time and time again, including by some of the most illustrious and well-regarded justices of the state, that the answer to the question is, I will evaluate it on a case-by-case basis, which is the rule and operating principle of
Judge
recusal.
Gertner said it here too, by the way,
She
not
did.
just in the Globe. Roger, at the mic in the studio here, you were next on Boston Public Radio with the Governor.
Governor, I'm one of the many Massachusetts citizens who voted for you enthusiastically because of your excellent record as Attorney General on climate. As you know, private jets are the worst form of travel per passenger mile for their carbon footprint, emitting up to 14 times as much carbon per person as commercial jets. Do you agree that Massport's plan to massively increase private jet flights from Hanscom is simply incompatible with the benchmarks laid out in the Massachusetts Roadmap Bill on climate that is now state law?
Thank you, Roger.
Roger, good to see you, and thank you for the question. I'm certainly well aware of the concerns about emissions caused generally, but certainly from our transportation industry, which I think, as you know, accounts for about 40% of greenhouse gas emissions. And so I'm absolutely aware of and sensitive to that. As you also know, this matter is before our office in terms of MEPA review right now. So I'll make any announcements at the appropriate time through that process, but I certainly appreciate your advocacy. And you're joined by a lot of folks out here who made their way down to Copley Square to voice your views.
Does that mean when you just said a minute ago you'll make your position known at an appropriate time, meaning you'll take a position before MEPA, as it's called, as to what you would like them to do? Is that what we should?
No, I trust my team and the experts evaluating this, so
Okay.
that's under review.
What did you mean a second ago when you said to Roger, though, I'll make my
I think
position
he
known?
wanted me to weigh in, and all I'm saying is I'm not gonna
Okay.
get ahead of our administrative agency on
You know,
that.
we talked a lot about this IVF situation after the abomination from the Alabama Supreme Court the other day. We talked with Judge Gertner, the same Judge Gertner, about the shield laws here in Massachusetts. And obviously the mifepristone case will be decided by the Supreme Court in June. Can you explain the state of affairs here, not just for people who live in Massachusetts, but people from other states who choose to take advantage of our laws and health facilities who don't live here?
It's pretty simple. You're a patient, you're a provider, come to Massachusetts. We will protect you, we will take care of you. We believe in women's reproductive freedom. We believe in our provider organizations, and we're going to continue to do just that. It's sad when the day comes that I have to stockpile mifepristone because we're living in a Handmaid's Tale scenario where that might be taken away. But, you know, this is the consequence. This is a consequence of Donald Trump, who, you know, the irony of him now exhorting the Alabama Supreme Court, the legislature now, to correct the ruling of the Supreme Court is just laughable. And I hope everybody takes that in. You know, the hypocrisy of somebody like Trump, Mike Johnson, give me a break. He was responsible for creating that Supreme Court that issued the Dobbs decision. And Dobbs was just the start of this, right? And the latest chapter was the Alabama Supreme Court. But this is what we got with Donald Trump, okay? So think about that in November. I'm proud of the fact that Massachusetts, I was just bragging on, 18 out of 20 of the world's leading life sciences companies are in Massachusetts. We've got Steward, conversation notwithstanding, remember, this is a home to some of the best hospitals in the world and the most compassionate caregivers and, people who pioneered things around IVF. So we're going to stand strong with that, and we're going to fight for Massachusetts. Because, by the way, on that mifepristone case that is before the Supreme Court, one of the things that's so upsetting about that is that it challenges the role of the Food and Drug Administration, experts, right, who have determined something like Miffy as safe and effective, right? It questions them and wants to supplant scientists and experts and public health officials with judges, who are, put there on various courts. And, it's just so wrong. IVF, think about IVF. Think about all the life-saving treatments and cures and innovations in so many aspects of health that are pioneered right out of here in Massachusetts. And so, you issue a decision like that, don't think about coming from Massachusetts. Don't think about it. We're having none of it.
Governor Healey, I'm getting a lot of texts from people. I guess you could say that they resent the help that the Commonwealth is giving to people that are coming here from different countries because they think that they're getting the short end and people are getting 3 squares a day and a place to live, et cetera. Talk about your policy about migrants in the Commonwealth.
Yeah. Well, first of all, this is not a problem that Massachusetts created. It's a problem that was created by Congress's failure to act over many, many years. And the shame of it is that there was a path to solving this. 2 weeks ago, one of the most conservative members of the United States Senate joined forces with a Democrat and independent, put forward a bipartisan bill that would have hardened border security, put more personnel on the border, put in resources to address things as well, like the flow of fentanyl back and forth, would have provided funding to states like Massachusetts that have had to shoulder the burden of the migrant crisis, and fixed so many aspects of our immigration system. And then Donald Trump spoke and said, there should be no deal. I don't want to give Biden a win, so nobody's going to vote on that. And then they all walked from the table. It's incredibly disappointing because that plan, which is a plan that President Biden supported and said he would sign, and he's going to go to the border in a few days to make that point clear, once again, that could have taken care of this. What I have said, though, here is that we have a legal obligation under our right to shelter law to house people. We're doing the best we can. We've also focused very much on getting people jobs, getting them work permits so that they can get plugged in with employers. We've processed 3,000 people to date, 3,000 people who are going to go out and fill the jobs that we need filled in construction, in hospitality, in our nursing homes, in our hospitals, and so much more. Across this country, and I talked to Democrat and Republican governors. We talked a lot about this when I was in DC. Everyone needs workers. We've got declining birth rates in this country, right? We need immigration. We need folks coming here. And we need to make sure it's done in a way that is lawful and that makes sense. But where we are right now is a scenario that, due to the failures of congressional Republicans to act, we're going to continue to shoulder the burden in our individual states.
But however, I think there's one exception. I think both of us share your perspective.
And also, I just want to say, I understand the concerns that people raise about a view that some may be skipping the line or getting things that they don't have access to. And I'll just say this. Our emergency shelter system right now in Massachusetts, half of it are folks who are Massachusetts families. Half of them are Massachusetts families. And it's one of the reasons we put forward this proposal on housing, because we just don't have enough housing in this state. Even if we have vouchers and things that people can use to go get an apartment, we don't have apartments out there that they can afford to move into. It's one of the reasons we need this housing bill passed. And so we're going to continue to work on getting people working, continue to push for more housing in the state, and continue to provide the supports that we've provided already to the domestic Massachusetts population.
Speaking of getting people to work, though, Margie and I were just talking about you and getting people to work the other day on the radio, and you discussed with us last month or the month before how you were expediting work permits for those who were permitted under federal law to have work permits.
Yeah.
But we'll ask you the same question we've asked you, I think, for 3 months. Our understanding, and I think you've confirmed this, is President Biden, without congressional approval, could expedite work permits for a larger percentage of the migrant population. And assuming that's true, which I believe it is, why hasn't he?
He has. I mean, honestly, there may be some more things around the edges that the Biden administration can do, but I can tell you, it's one thing to be able to say we're going to do something, okay? But you also need bodies to operationalize that, okay? You need judges in immigration courts to deal with backlogs. You need people at the border processing people, right? And fulfilling those work authorization requests. Congress refuses to provide a dime for that funding. So, the president's in a difficult position. I appreciate, though, what the president has done. The one thing, that we were able to do with the administration, because we're not getting a dime from Congress, is say, hey, can you send people from Department of Homeland Security to Massachusetts, which they did. We paired them up with members of our team, members of the Attorney General's office, legal services organizations, volunteer lawyers, and in quick order, at one of our local military bases, we processed 3,000 almost migrants for work authorizations. Now they're coming back. And we've got two people I hired specifically, who are matching up employers around the state with those migrants, which at the end of the day will be good for our economy. We need the workers. It's also the case that we need to continue to push for more federal funding and relief, which I'm not giving up on, but I'm just going to be honest with people about the state of play here. The fault is on Congress. The fault is on the Republican Party right now, which seems far more interested in listening to and following, and not all Republicans, but unfortunately the zeitgeist of that party right now is to do whatever it is that their perceived nominee wants them to do, which includes refusing to do what this country needs.
Let's go to
right
Kevin.
now.
Kevin is at the mic at the library. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Hi, Governor. My name's Kevin. I live in Hingham. And I wanted to follow up on you asking for community support around infrastructure. So in terms of climate resilience, there are billions of dollars in infrastructure law to get communities to upgrade their electrical infrastructure and to put utilities underground. And on the South Shore on 3A, that would all be very, very helpful. So what do we do in our communities to make that happen? Do we contact our Green Community Initiatives coordinator? Do we contact Department of Utilities? How do we help you get those federal dollars to Massachusetts?
Well, stay on the line, and I can tell you exactly, Kevin, how you can get plugged in. I should say stay in the building and make sure we get your contacts. One of the exciting things that we did recently, and I think about Hingham as a coastal community in particular, is we formed for the first time a coastal community stakeholder group working directly with our Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs to sort of game plan where we need to make those strategic investments in infrastructure, how we can better work state, supported, we hope, by federal funding, but also just state funding, working directly with communities as they map out and plan infrastructure projects in Hingham and elsewhere. So I want to make sure that you're up to speed on all of that work. But I certainly appreciate the focus on this. It breaks my heart when I look at the paper today, of course, and see the picture of the poor guy from Leominster, right? We had devastating floods. We will continue to see more devastating floods. And we know that FEMA doesn't have the formula to address this. There aren't state funds available. The cities and towns don't have funds available. One of the things I proposed a few weeks ago in our budget was the creation of a fund. We would capitalize it with some revenues to make sure that we have a fund set up to help cities and towns build back in resilient ways, so that they can actually afford to repair the dam or the bridge or the culvert. I mean, they need that money. And by the way, it's no good if they have to be reimbursed because they don't have the money on the front end to be able to pay for these things. So all this work, we're really, really focused on, Kevin, and I appreciate your interest and support.
Leave your contact information and we'll share with the governor's office. Lawrence, also at the BPL mic. Lawrence, welcome to the show.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Governor.
Good afternoon, Lawrence.
I am from Riverside, Cambridge. My question is, we were left out of the process of making us prisoners for the weekend when they shut down Memorial Drive. Granted, right now, it seems to be set back to the original pre-COVID status, but also on the desk of your office and the legislation is to reenact that. And again, our same governmental body has left us out of every process, including we met with the now DCR Commissioner Arrigio on January 30th, who was promised to have a meeting with us this week. Unfortunately, that meeting has been canceled due to the fact he said he has not counseled with you. I'm certain, in hearing all the wonderful things you're doing, that this individual can do his task and move it forward. So 2 things, please. 1, can we have some written communication from the now commissioner who has sent us none, who has promised us continuously and nothing? Second, can we get an answer to something that is totally absurd, to make one neighborhood, 1 out of 11 held DCR front water properties, take on the task of being held prisoners from Friday to Monday? And I'm only putting that because those are when the holidays happen. And, you know, the state's only got so much money.
We got it, Lauren. We got it. You've done it eloquently, I should say. We're running out of time. That's the only reason I'm cutting you off. Governor, do you want to respond to Lawrence, please?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we have had meetings, we've had discussions, and you were part of those discussions, I think, as part of the Riverbend Park Association. Just so folks know, the issue is this. Before COVID, Memorial Drive was closed on Sundays. During COVID, public health emergency, they closed it down on Saturday and Sunday. So there were calls from some people, electeds, and some others, residents, to keep that going, close it down both Saturday and Sunday. And then there were concerns raised by members of the Riverbend Park community and the surrounding community that, hey, if you close it down, you've got traffic being diverted through our neighborhoods, continuing to the exacerbation of air pollution and poor air quality, right? So we hear you, we see you, we've been at those meetings. What I asked Commissioner Arrigo to do, who came on this year and is doing a great job at DCR, was to say, hey, we're hearing mixed messages, so let's make the call on this. Let's go, let's hear from community. You'll hear soon on that. Again, this is something that happens, what is it? It's April to November is when this happens. So we're coming up on it, and you will hear very soon. But I appreciate and have continued to appreciate the input of community members. You know, mine is a team that is very focused on issues of environmental justice. I'm proud as governor that we have an administration that for the first time put 14 environmental justice fellows in communities around the state. That's how committed we are to the concerns that you, Lawrence, and others raise. And so we'll be getting to you soon.
You only have a minute left, I know, and thanks for your generous contribution of time here. You know, you talked about the situation in Milton. Yesterday, we talked about the no vote in Dedham about expanding the workforce to prepare meals for migrants.
Oh yeah, the church was leading it.
3-2 voted down by, I think, the zoning board. You mentioned the resistance of some communities to whatever infrastructure is needed to expand clean energy, and that. We talk a lot about the rise, what we perceive as the rise of NIMBYism in Massachusetts and how much it worries us. Do you worry about it, and what do you say to people who are protective of their own space, sort of over the common good, for lack of a better expression, Governor?
Yeah, well, I guess I'll say a couple things. You know, Kim Driscoll and I come to these jobs with a real sensitivity to the needs of communities, cities and towns. Obviously, she was the mayor of Salem for a good number of years. I'm somebody who grew up in a small town, and you know, my parents were selectmen and on the planning board and conservation commission and zoning and you name it, right? So one thing is clear to us, you know, first of all, NIMBYism has existed since the dawn of time, right? That's nothing new. It's also the case, though, that people have legitimate concerns and fears and, you know, ideas about how things should be done. It's why we've invited people in for conversation. It's why we will continue to. We also do need to recognize that, you know, one of the special and wonderful things about this place is we're coming up on town meeting season, 351 cities and towns, controlling a lot, local control over things like education, for example. We also, though, need to recognize that to solve the challenges that we need to solve for our state, We can't go it alone, town by town, city by city. We need a collective agreement. We need collective buy-in, you know? It's the only way this is gonna work. If you got one member of the orchestra playing off on their own, not in sync with others, you know, you're not gonna deliver the symphony that people wanna hear. So that's where we're at, and we're gonna continue to work with cities and towns, but we need everybody at the table. We need people to find common ground on things like housing. It's never one size fits all. Community by community, you know, different needs, different ways of doing things, but the point is engagement, communication, collaboration, partnership. That's how we're going to get things done. That's how we're going to move Massachusetts forward. Massachusetts will continue to lead for the next 250 years if we do it that way.
Governor Healey, thanks so much for your time as always.
Thank you
We really
very much.
appreciate it.
That was Governor Maura Healey, who was kind enough to spend an hour with us, and we hope she's back in March as well. Thank you very much again, Governor Healey. Up next, we're going to talk with CNN's John King. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7.